All right, so last week we had some requests to do an active record, like how do we, draw out the database to write the migrations, to write all the validations inside of our models, and how do we seed it and how do we work with that? And so we're going to do that today. So I'm just going to open it up for anyone to tell me about a website, and we will dumb it down to just the core basics, and we'll write an app that does that, mimics that. So give me any website that you want or any concept that you want, and we'll make some tables and associations with that.
Pinterest.
Pinterest, okay. I'm not familiar with Pinterest.
Okay, Instagram.
Instagram, okay. So let's talk about the tables that are associated with Instagram. What is Instagram for? Does everyone know what Instagram is? Okay.
Photo sharing.
Photo sharing, okay. So Instagram is photo sharing. What is on every single Instagram? Like, what are some of the tables that you would need on Instagram?
Users.
Users. I agree with that. They're almost always, you can always start with users. So users, what else?
Comments.
Comments. What else? Posts. Photos. Are there posts or are there photos? I don't know.
I don't think you can just do.
I don't know.
I think it has to be a photo. I don't think you just post.
Okay, I think photos can also have posts, but that's getting a little bit too much in the weeds. I mean, we can do that. It just makes our challenge much more difficult. All right, so users, photos, comments, anything else?
Likes,
settings, and likes. Yeah. I will do likes for now. Okay. I do agree with settings. I just don't want to do that right now. So we'll do first name. A user has a first name. We'll mix that text. A user also has a last name. Make that text. We'll add another field called email address. Make that text. And we'll just do that for now. First name, last name, and email address. A comment has what? Like the comments table, like each individual comment has a timestamp. We can assume that for everybody.
There's like emojis and stuff you can put in there.
Okay, so it has like content, right?
Yeah.
So we'll just call this content. And that's pretty much all a comment has. A comment is just a bunch of text or emojis or some sort of content. A photo, let's just say it has like a URL. We upload it somewhere, and then this is where it lives. And then likes, I don't think there's really anything, right? Likes would just be likes is just like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so we have all of these tables, and we made very, very basic columns on every single table. Like a user has a first name, last name, and an email column. Now it becomes a little bit more difficult because we need to associate all of these together. So let's think about this. Does a user have many comments, or does a user belong to a comment? A user has many comments, and which means does a comment have many users, or does a comment belong to a user?
All
right, so when we say it belongs to, I'm going to create an association between this table and this table. So does a comment ID go on the user table, or does a user ID go on the comments table?
The comments goes under user.
I'm not sure. I don't know what people are saying.
User ID goes the comments.
Okay.
The comments holds the key for the user.
Correct. All right, so I'm going to add a field here, user ID. And then I'm going to connect this down to over here. So we said a user has many comments, and each individual comment belongs to one singular user. And that's why we have this user ID on here, because it only belongs to one. So I agree with that. I like this. A user has many photos, or a photo has many users?
User has many photos.
A user has many photos. And a photo, in that case, belongs to a user, user ID. A user has many likes, or a like has many users?
User has many likes.
Does a like belong to a user?
kind of belongs to a photo.
Sure.
So like giving or receiving likes?
What's that?
You can like something, but someone can like your stuff.
Yeah, so that's where this, like, all of the reactions on top of a post or a comment or another reaction is really sucky for the developers because it's just like a bunch of nested stuff all the way down. You're starting to see that a little bit, right? So let's think about likes a little bit more. Are these associated in any way? Does a user have many likes, and does a like have many users?
Isn't it? I think it's particular to the photo. I think photos is what really store all likes.
Sure. All right. So that we could say that users and likes have no interaction whatsoever, and that's okay. That's that. These decisions we're making now will have repercussions later, positive or negative. I think it's fine.
A user will like something, and then that like will be associated with that ID. Like so and so liked your photo.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Is that word that way?
I'm just basing
Yeah.
off basic knowledge.
I like that. I think that's fine. It's up to you. If you want to go with a user has many likes and a like belongs to a user, a like can also belong to a user and a photo. That's okay too.
Well, I think as far as like storing those likes, it would be more appropriate. The way that I'm thinking about it, it'd be more appropriate to store it, to have that be associated with the photo itself.
Okay. Well, we're going to go with that one. We'll just go with that for now, and we'll make that decision later. So I think we've done everything that we can with users. We said a user has many comments, and a comment, singular, belongs to a user. A user has many photos that you can upload, and a photo belongs to one singular user.
Can you, as a user, track all the things you've liked?
I think so. I think you can. Yeah. So, but I don't want to go in that direction because this is just an example. All right. So let's think about this. There's a comment. How is a comment and a photo related? Because we already said a comment and a user is related in some way. How is a comment and a photo related? Does a comment have many photos, or does a photo have many comments?
Photo has to be-
All right. So where does the association go? On which table?
So photos ID would go in the comments.
Photo ID goes on comments. Photo ID. And then that means that this photo is connected over here. Okay. Yeah, Tristan.
Can you, because I ran into this yesterday, can you just in 5 seconds re-explain that plural singular relationship between like your table names, your table labels, and your like foreign key names?
Sure. So every single table is going to be plural because it stores many of that particular item.
Okay.
So like users, there's numerous user records, so that's why it's a users table.
Okay.
When you talk about an individual row, you're talking about one singular object, right? So it's one user is in the users table.
Okay.
And because if you take a look under comments, there are many comments. Each individual comment belongs to one singular user, which is why I'm connecting it using a user ID rather than a user's ID.
Okay.
All right, so we connected a photo and a comment together. A comment belongs to a photo, and a photo has many comments. Okay, what about a comment and a like?
No association.
A comment does not have a like. Okay.
You could like a
I
comment.
mean, you could.
You
we
could, like-
make it that way.
Yeah, this could be really, really bad really quickly. I'm going to actually remove this table. I'm sorry. I'm just going to throw it off to the corner over here. All right, and a photo, finally, we say a photo belongs to a user, and a photo has many comments. A user has many photos and many comments, and a comment belongs to a user and a photo. Every single table is kind of related to each other. How do you feel about this?
Messy.
It's a little messy.
Join tables.
Joint, you don't need one. That's only when you have like
Many to many.
yeah, many to many. Yeah. This is actually, I think this is actually correct. I don't
Yeah.
think there's anything else.
I think it is.
Because let's think about this, because we'll never have more time than we do right now once we jump into the code. A user has many photos. That makes sense, and a photo belongs to one individual user. I think that's correct. A comment belongs to one singular user, and a comment belongs to one singular photo. That's also correct. A photo belongs to one user and has many comments. I think that's right. I don't think there's anything else. You feeling okay with this? All right, let's translate this into code. So when we take a look at, I'm just using budget 2 as kind of like a skeleton, like it's already mostly made for me. So I'm going to just grab it and clone it down. And I've got it over here. Now, remember when I said during week 1 that all we're doing right now is just dealing with one file or two, like one JavaScript and one Ruby file, and I promised you at one point you're going to have 1,000 more files. That's essentially what I've done over here. So I'm going to go over each and every single one of these, and again, I'm recording so you can go back at your own leisure. README is easy. It's just what shows up on the internet. Like do you remember when we created a budgeting terminal? Do you remember when we created a budgeting terminal? That's all README is. It's just an area where you write code. This .md stands for Markdown. So we're going to learn about HTML today. There's also other flavors of Markdown language. So HTML is Markdown language. XML is Markdown language. Markup, sorry. And then Markdown MD is another version of Markdown language. So this singular hashtag here stands for H1, which we'll learn about in just a little bit. But this file right here is just for you to read. Nothing special. Then we have a rake file. A rake file, the R in the front stands for Ruby. So it's Ruby make. These are actions that you're able to, like, that are built into Ruby for you through this rake file. So I can do DB console, I can do DB generate fixtures, I have all of these. You don't need to play with this. It's just, it was there as a configuration for you so that you can run through rake DB migrate, rake DB seed, rake DB drop, things like that. The gem file, remember when we were originally writing things, all we had to do was do gem install this, gem install this, gem install this, and then we just did a bunch of requires at the very top. Because people are going to be working at like I have a bunch of stuff installed on my machine that Tristan might not have installed at his machine. So what I do is I have more or less a manifest of all the specs that I'm going to, all the gems that I'm going to need in order to run this particular file. And then all he needs to do is install each one of these individually or run through what's called a bundle install, which I'll show you in a bit. But again, gem file, it's just a manifest of all the gems that you're going to need in order to run this particular application. This source, Ruby gems, is basically where am I downloading it from. The gem file lock basically says once I install all of these gems, I'm looking at these particular versions. So if I told you I need you to download Internet Explorer, it's vague. Similarly, I want you to install RSpec, it's vague. You need to tell me exactly which version you want. So you can kind of see, like RSpec, I want you to download version 3.5.0. That means that like 100% of the time we'll be on the exact same page. So these include all of the versions. And you can kind of see that even though I've only had 5 or 6 gems over here in the gem file, inside of the gem file lock, I have like 78 lines of code. Each individual one of these gems require other gems, and those gems require other gems, and then down the line you go. So that's why when you download one thing, you're actually downloading a whole bunch of other things, including all of this here.
Installed.
Where are gems installed?
Yeah.
They're actually inside the your machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't hang out in a different folder.
They don't. No, it's not like node modules. It's not like Python's virtual environment. No, it's actually on your machine.
Are those considered dependencies?
Those are just considered dependencies. That's correct. All right. So then we have a test file. This is not supposed to be here. Then we have a spec file. All of your code that you write is going to be inside of here. So all of my models, I'm going to test inside of the models. So you can kind of see we're starting to move towards what's called an MVC framework. MVC stands for Model View Controller. And that's just a way that we write code. So all of the objects that we're going to have inside our database, including all of our users, comments, and photos, those are all going to be put under the models folder. All the code that you write is going to be tested down in the spec file. So this just correlates like this. We'll get to that in a little bit more detail later. All of the config stuff, don't touch, like pretty much never touch. But essentially what it is it configures your entire application so that it runs. Most of the time it's given to you by default, whenever you run generator command, like it'll automatically generate this file for you because that's most of the time that's what you need. And the main thing that you need to worry about this is you don't need to worry about anything, but remember when we had to require relative everything at the top of every file, and that was kind of annoying? This one line over here, line 19, basically says that within every single model, we're going to require every other model inside of it so we can talk with other models together. We don't have to require relative at the very top. And then the database here is like the database setup. Right now, I've named my development, test, and production database budget development. I'm going to just change this into, what was it, Instagram?
Yes.
Instagram development, test, and production. Why do you think it's important to have 3 different databases for any app?
One that you can test, one that you can run on locally,
Yep.
and then one that's going to be deployed.
Exactly, yeah. So you have 3 different environments, right? There is like, I don't know if I can liken this to a military example, especially when I'm not military myself. But the idea is like when I write code on my machine, it just lives on my machine. That's the development machine. I'm just writing it. If it blows up, it's just on my machine. It doesn't affect anybody else. When I write the test, when I run anything inside of test, there's a separate environment for that. And then finally, when you get to production, like I do not have the ability to go into Amazon. If I'm writing code for Amazon, I don't have the ability to go into Amazon's production database and do stuff there. Like that is meant for specific teams. And when I develop stuff locally on my machine, I don't want to impact, you know, John Smith down the street, you know, trying to make an order for his daughter's birthday or something like that. So having 3 separate environments means that the data that you manage is never going to get messed up. So I have one specific database for development on this particular machine, one specific database for testing, and one specific database for production. And for most people, they also have what's called a staging database, which is a copy of production so that you can see if it works in like with everything else before you push it out to production. So under DB, there is a migrate folder. And under migrate right now, there's nothing inside of there. So we're going to create all 3 tables inside of our migration, but I don't know how to write that. So let's say ActiveRecord migration generation. I don't know. Let's take a look. ActiveRecord migrations, Ruby on Rails guides. I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to keep looking. It looks like something like this. I'm not sure what that means. Let's just take. All right. So it looks like Rails generate migration and add parts to numbers. Sure. We'll just do that. So we had, let me just bundle install everything. So bundle install, again, goes inside of your gem file, finds all of these gems, and then installs all of them at one time, rather than you going gem install rspec, gem install pg, gem install rake, and so on and so forth. Just
So when you're doing that bundle bundle install, you're pulling from a spec file. You're not like pulling from. At the time, I didn't know where that was coming from. So it's coming from a gem file. Okay, cool.
Careful with those words too. So the spec file actually refers to this thing over here, and that's the tests. But I know what you're going with, like the dependencies, like the gems. Yeah. So when I do bundle install, it looks for a gem file, finds all these gems, and installs them all at once. Otherwise, I would have to literally copy and paste line by line. That's all it's doing. It's just bundle install. I'm installing everything at one time. If you've installed it before, it'll turn out white like this. And if you've not installed it before, it'll turn green, saying like, oh, I actually need to go out, grab all the code and install it on your machine. So you can kind of see I've installed everything before. And now I'm going to run BundleExec rake. What is it? Generate migration. Generate migration. Create users. The BundleExec at the front basically, oh crap, don't know. I think it's Rails now. Please hold. Let's see. Let's try it one more time. I think something blew up. Rake is outdated because Rails 5 got rid of Rake. So I think that's what's going on here. Let's see. Drop the script part, Rails generate model. Okay. There's no Rails here. Actually, let's just do this manually. I was trying to teach a shortcut. All right, so when you create a migration, the frame of it looks, the file name looks a little something like this. Year, month, date, hour, minute, second, and then the name of the file. And this is important because when Rails and when all your frameworks go through your migrations, they need to read the timestamp to know what they should install first and what they should install later. So if you think of, in terms of Amazon's history, at the very beginning in 1999, they just were creating books. So I want to make sure the timestamp says 1999. So if I were to recreate the whole Amazon database, it would start with that first one and then go all the way down. It's like, so they started with books, they moved into like e-commerce, they tried to make a phone, the phone sucked, so they removed the phone, and so on and so forth. You want to make sure that you keep track of all of those dates. Because if you create the phone first and you create the books, then everything is out of order and some tables may rely on another. So I'm going to change this. We're just going to call this 2018, what day is today? 0530, let's say it's 10:31 and 0 seconds. I'm going to create a file called users. I'm going to save this under DB, migrate, and just save it in here. So I've got that right here. Again, it's year, month, date, hour, minute, second, and then create users. The file looks a little something like this. Where did it go? There it is. We're just going to copy and paste it in here. So we've got a class called create users. As of right now, I have a completely empty database. There's literally nothing inside of it, and I need to create all of my tables. So I'm going to create a table called users, do T. T stands for table. And I'm going to basically insert all of the stuff that I said inside of it. So I have a first name, last name, and email address. All of those are going to be strings. So it's going to be t.string first name, t.string last name, and t.string email address. And what I'm doing here is I'm just creating the table with the things inside of it. ActiveRecord's a wrapper around SQL so that I don't actually have to write the SQL. Otherwise, I do create table users, insert column first name, like varchar 155 or something like that. And then finally, I have t.timestamps. T.timestamp stands for created at and updated at. Those are two things that you probably would want to know. When was this record created and when was the last time somebody touched it? And they give this to us for free. I'm going to repeat this twice for the other two, and we will migrate the database over. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this 2018 0530. It is 10:33 now. And there's two other tables we have, comments and photos. Create comments.rb. And then one other one, 2018 0530. 10, let's just say 3400. And then there was a create photos.rb. So I've got three files. I'm just going to more or less copy over. One for comments, create comments. A comment has a content, belongs to a user, and belongs to a photo. Has content, and it's probably going to be like they can write as much as they want, so I'm going to change that to a text. And then it belongs to two other places. So I can do t.belongs to photo and t.belongs to user. All I'm doing is literally translating what we wrote here into actual code. A comment has content, belongs to a user, and belongs to a photo. And then finally, we got this photo over here. A photo has a URL and belongs to a user. It has a string for the URL and belongs to a user, and that's about it. Let's see if this runs before we move on to the models themselves. So all I've done so far, number one, I created my database and thought, like, how is everything more or less related? I have different columns here, and now I'm going to start moving it into actual code. The migrations are basically scripts that you're going to run over and over again so that people can easily replicate. So it's like when you go to work at Groupon or something like that, there are many different apps. The app has been changed a number of times. Maybe they destroyed comments and called it like something else. Maybe they got rid of photos and now they're doing binds or something like that. So it's been changed a bunch of times. So when a new person comes in, they can just run the scripts, all the migrations, and then they'll have a database that's the most up to date. So the first thing I'm going to do BundleExec rake db drop. This is an issue on my computer. Don't worry about this. The first thing I do all the time is I drop the database. Just in case it already exists, I want to make sure that I'm starting completely fresh. So I drop the database completely. At this point, I'm going to create a database, and it's just going to be empty. Nothing inside of it, no tables, no nothing. And then I'm going to migrate all of my stuff over. All these different scripts that I wrote, create a table called photos, which has a URL and belongs to a user, create comments that has a content, belongs to a photo, belongs to a user. I want to merge all of this stuff inside of my actual database, because as of right now, it's just an empty database. I run this, and I'm probably going to blow up. Oh, it still works. Okay, cool. So you can kind of see it reads in order. So this one executed first because it was at 10:31. This was at 10:33, and then this one was at 10:34. It executes in order, and that's why the timestamp's important. I created the users, I created the comments, and then I created the photos. So now I have a database. If I do just pSQL Instagram development, and I do \D to list out all the tables, I have comments, photos, and users. If I do select star from comments, there's nothing in there yet because it's just an empty database with just the tables inside of there for now. \Q to get out, and we're going to move on to models. Step 1, draw everything out. Step 2, write the migration. Step 3, you're going to do all the associations under models. So I have a user, a comment, and a photo. So I'm just going to do that real quick. User.rb, photo.rb, and comment.rb. You'll notice that these are all singular because I'm talking about one individual record inside the database. So let's take a look at users. A user, class user, inherits from ActiveRecord base. And I think that's it. A user has many comments and has many photos. Was that correct? A user has many comments and a user has many photos. I need to write that in here. Has many comments, has many photos. Maybe we want to have some validations. You must have a first name, last name, and email address. So I don't know how to do that. ActiveRecord validations. Validates name, presence, true. Seems easy enough. Validates first name and last name. And you have to have an email address, and it has to be distinct. Let's do that. So email address, presence true, and is there a unique? Oh, uniqueness true. Nice. I will add that in here. So I did all the associations and all the validations. I just said first name and last name must be there. They have to have an email address, and it has to be unique. You shouldn't have two users with the same email address. Otherwise, you end up with bad data, like Blue Cross Blue Shield and Ventra. Now we're moving on to the photo. We do class photo, inherits from ActiveRecord base, and a photo has many comments and belongs to a user. Simple enough, has many comments, belongs to user. A photo has to have a URL, so we'll just do a quick validation and throw it in its place. Validates URL, presence true, and we're done with that one. Finally, we're at the comment. So class comment inherits from ActiveRecord base. A comment belongs to a user, belongs to a photo, and has content. And validates content, presence true. Step one, again, draw everything out. Spend a lot of time on this one. Step two, create your migrations so that you can actually have tables with everything inside of there. Step three, and this is where people get a little bit more confused, you're going to create models so that with all of the belongs to and validations over here, just because you have this user, this comment belongs to a photo and belongs to a user inside the database does not equate to the model level.
And the model level is modeling out the associations.
Yep. And then the validations are pretty easy. It's just like making sure the data that you put in is correct. So at this particular point, the last step that we didn't talk about is something called seeds. I'm going to add a new file called seeds.rb. I'm going to have just a regular seed file that I'm going to create a bunch of users and create a bunch of data. So I'm going to create, let's say, 5 users, create 10 photos, and create 15 comments. I'm going to do these 3 things, and then we'll play around with it inside the actual database. So how do I create a user?
If we want to use something like Fakir, we can only use that if we're using ActiveRecord. We can't use it if we're using just pure SQL, right?
Yes. Yeah. The question was, if we're using the Fakir Gem, can I use that in ActiveRecord, or can I use that in SQL? And the answer is you can only use it in ActiveRecord, or any sort of Ruby thing. And what he's talking about is the Fakir Gem. At one point, let's just start creating users. So user.create, first name, Jonathan, last name, Young, email address is john@codeplatoon.org. Imagine if I had to do this, I'm only doing it 5 times, which is going to take us a bit of time. But if I had to create 500 users or 5,000 users very quickly, this takes way too long. So I'm going to create 5 users using the Fakir Gem. The Fakir Gem is basically a bunch of fake data that you can use at any given time. So let's say we need email. Email? Is there an email one? I believe it's under company, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there's another one called name right there. So if I do Fakir name, first name and last name, it'll create random names for me at random. And then under company, if I do Fakir company and I do email, is there an email in here? There's no email in here. Oh, Fakir internet email, there it is. So when I wanted to add a gem, I used to do gem install, but now I'm going to put in Fakir inside of the gem file. Just do gem Fakir, run bundle install, and at this particular point, I have the ability to use the Fakir gem. So instead of creating 5 users like this, I'm going to do user.create, and I'm going to do Fakir, I think it's name.firstname, last name, and email address. And then just like that, I can create 5 users very quickly rather than me hard coding it a bunch of times. Now the photos are a little bit different. A photo, if I jump back over here, has a URL and belongs to a user. Okay, so 10 times do photo.create URL, and then user ID. I'm just going to choose a random number between 1 and 5 because I created 5 users. The URL, I'm just going to say that it's google.com, sure. And finally, I'm going to do 15 comments, 15 times do. I believe a comment has content, comment.create content, and I'm just going to put in some sort of Fakir data. I believe it belongs to a photo, so photo ID is going to be some random number between 1 and 10. And the user ID is going to be some random number between 1 and 5. The content, we're just going to go into Fakir Hipster right over here. And we're just going to choose a random sentence. So whenever I do Fakir hipster.sentence, they're just going to, choose a bunch of ridiculous things that hipsters say. Pork, iPhone, leggings, put a bird on it. So again, just going back, step 1, draw everything out. Step 2, create your migrations. Step 3, do all your associations and validations. Step 4, seed it. So I created 5 users, 10 photos, 15 comments. I'm going to do BundleExec, rake db seed at this point. So I have the database, it was empty. I put a bunch of stuff inside of it, and then I'm going to populate it with some data. There's a name error, uninitialized constant Fakir. I'm using it here. Do I just have to require Fakir at the top? All right, so it looks like nothing happened, which is a good thing. So if I do pSQL, Instagram development, and I do \d, let's do select star from comments limit 1. So now I have one particular comment, lumber sexual celiac intelligentsia carry. This is the content of the comment. It belongs to photo number 3 with a user ID of number 5. So this is one way of doing things. You can interact with the database using the pSQL client. An easier way of doing it is doing BundleExec rake console. So I have an IRB terminal at this particular point. So I can do like 1 + 2 and I get 3. I can do all of my Ruby commands, but it's also connected to the database. So if I do user.all, I get all of the users coming back to me. So let's just do u equals user.first. A user has many photos. Let's see if this works. So I can do u.photos, and I get a collection of 3 different photos, or 2 different photos. And from here, I can maybe I'll choose the first photo. All right, and you can kind of see that this particular photo has a URL of google.com, belongs to this user number 1. Does this photo have any comments? It does. So you can kind of see I can go from the user to the photos to the comments, and each one of these comments have a bunch of content in them. So I'm just going to map over this entire collection and get to the content. So the first one was lumber sexual celiac intelligentsia carry, then banh mi, put a bird on it, umami, chillware, whatever. things that hipsters say, I suppose. Does this help at all in terms of the in terms of how I would set things up? So step number one, I just draw out this. This is the majority of my time. Like again, I know that this took a while because it was the first time that we saw it, but this is really the majority of my time. All of my decisions are made over here. Second, I'm going to actually create my tables with all of the columns inside of them. Then I do all my associations over here, write a seeds file, and then now I'm able to get around from one table to another and bounce around very quickly. Any questions on anything?
And those folders and everything with like the database folder, those are going to be automatically generated when we get to Rails.
Yeah, the question was, all of these folders that were here, like I stole from Budget 2. Like I just cloned down Budget 2 and I rewrote it. This stuff that you see over here is automatically generated when it comes to Rails. Rails has a lot more than this. They have 56 folders and like 140 files generated automatically. We're just taking bits and pieces right now just to make this small section work so that when we continue building and you get to Rails, it's not like, holy crap, there's 56 folders that we've never seen before. You'll know what app models is. This is where all of your comment and your user and your photo are. You know config is, it's just a file, just a folder that you don't really need to touch. The DB, this is the migration folder where I create all my stuff. The seeds where I insert a bunch of fake data. The specs are over here, gem file. Like a lot of this is going to be the exact same. We're just building up to it. But yes, this will automatically be generated.
John, back to your back to the diagram.
Mm-hmm.
So can the associations, the relations, can they work both ways?
Can associations go both ways? I'm not sure what you mean.
So we have, for example, a photo and a comment. So we were discussing, you know, does a photo belong to a comment? Does a comment belong to a photo?
Yeah.
Can it work both ways?
It can work both ways, yeah. So a comment, this is not a great example because there's only one clear way that this works. Like a comment belongs to a photo and a photo has many comments. This is the only way that it works. But let's say that we had like, let's scroll down a little bit. Let's say we had, no, let's create a table called like students and classes. Think back many years when we were back in high school. So a student has many classes, right? And a class has many students inside of it. Like you as a student, you had many classes that you went through the day. Every single class has 20, 30 students. So when it does go both ways in this particular case. But you can't say that a class, like a student belongs to a class and associate it like this, because you're saying that one particular record of a student belongs to one particular class. So in order, like I'm John Young, my period number 1 was Algebra 2 with Mr. Gillen, right? But I only belong to that particular class at this point. I need to actually, what I need to do is create a join table in the middle so that I can have many classes. Otherwise you'd have multiple versions of Jonathan Young just belonging to one particular class. Period 1 was Algebra 2 with Mr. Gillen. Period 2 was English with Miss Warren. I don't remember anymore. It's kind of amazing I still remember that. So when you have a many-to-many relationship, a many-to-many relationship being a student has many classes and a class has many students, you have to have a join table in the middle. So I'm going to remove this foreign key, remove this field, add a new table called student classes. But this belongs to a student and also belongs to a class. So this would connect here and this would connect here. Instead of, so what I did by creating this join table, so John's original question was, can it go both ways? And yes, a student has many classes, a class has many students. When there's a many-to-many relationship like that, you must have a join table in the middle. The join table means that I can have one particular student and one particular class, and all that's changing is individual records in the middle that associate the two together. So I just have a join table with a two numbers inside of it. So I can say a class has many students through this table in the middle, and a student has many classes through this table in the middle. I didn't want to get into that today because I just wanted to do something very simple like this, but we will cover this some other time.
One more question.
Sure.
On email, you made that a text. Why was that text and not a varchar? Or
let's see.
that's on the diagram.
Oh, on this diagram? Oh, I just wanted to show up as red. That's all. I can change this. I can change this to varchar. It doesn't matter. This is just for illustration purposes. So it's kind of like the red stuff is stuff that you type in. The yellow stuff is just numbers.
Will text accept integers and characters?
Yes, string will also accept that, and varchar.
Okay.
Yeah. So string and varchar are the same thing. They go up to 255 characters. Anything longer than 255 characters is essentially a paragraph. So they change that into text. John?
If there's any way you could just, I think I understand how this works pretty well, but if there's like best practices or like a hard and fast set of rules that you use, because I understand how tables work pretty well.
Yeah.
I understand exactly why you use that.
Yeah.
So it's the thing that I'd like to hear is like, if there's a one-to-many relationship, you can just have two tables. But if there's like a many-to-many, you can't.
Yes.
Is there, if you reverse it and say there's a many-to-one, like, I mean, is there like a sort of hard and fast rule where you evaluate the two things and then make a decision?
Sure. Yeah. So the question is basically, we have two scenarios going on here. This is a one-to-many relationship. One user has many comments. One user has many photos. A photo belongs to one singular user, and a comment belongs to one singular user. This is a one-to-many relationship. A many-to-many relationship is what we got down here. Students have many classes, and classes have many students. Because I said the word many twice, that's that many-to-many relationship. You need the join table in the middle. The last question that Sean asked was, what happens when you have a many-to-one? So it's kind of like that's this concept where it's yeah. So you're saying it like it belongs to one, right? Like that's the association that you're talking about. I've seen that done like very rarely. It's not very common. I've done it personally, I've done it personally, but most of the time, there's few occasions where that you would need that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really just looking for best practices. Like, will you always try to get it down to be a one-to-one relationship, or are you satisfied with a one-to-many relationship?
Like most apps that you'll build is a one-to-many relationship or a many-to-many relationship. There's not many where it's a one-to-one ratio. All right, let's take a break. 11:10, we'll be back.